Welcome to Life in Color, a podcast about our world today through the voices of two women of color. Today's podcast will cover the topic of representation in the media and the importance of representation.
Over the past 10 years, there have been a significant increase in the amount of diversity within films, including especially with Disney. They've included a lot more, they've made more movies that center around characters that are Asian and Hispanic and Latina, and they're not the same white cookie cutter princess that they've been doing for a really long time, which I think is really beneficial, especially since Disney is big in kids movies and especially in their TV shows. They've moved away from that and included a lot of diversity, and since so many people almost everyone's lives include Disney films in some way or another, I think it's really beneficial that they're adding more diversity into their films.
Definitely, and I feel maybe this is completely wrong, but I feel since Black Panther came out, that's when Disney really started to have more people of color leads, because they saw how well that movie was doing with an almost fully black cast.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel I noticed that shift over to that. I didn't know Marvel was Disney.
Because so what's another movie that stars a person of color that has been made recently, after the Black Panther movie that you really like?
I really liked Shang-Chi, Legend of the Ten Rings, because I just think the representation was there with the cast having a lot of different types of Asian people in it, and it was really good at being just representing them in a very respectful way, which I really liked. And then also you have the Disney movies that are cartoons that came out recently, which is Encanto and Turning Red, which also just they're more of the slice of life, less well, Encanto not really, but Turning Red's more realistic and just I think just digs deeper into what people are experiencing now today versus in the past, in a more magical, fantastical kind of way.
Yeah, and Disney has definitely been making a lot of movies recently with women leads too, especially women of color. So Moana, for example, that was a movie that I feel everybody loved. It was such a good movie, and the main character was a person of color and a woman, which I actually loved about it.
Yeah. And what I think is even better is there's also the movie, I'm pretty sure it's Raya, in The Last Dragon, and that is another person of color being represented in film. But what I think is even better about these is they're also Disney is working to not only have them as a cartoon, but also have them being voiced by people who are the same ethnicity as the character is supposed to be, which I think just adds a whole another layer of bringing diversity into the Hollywood and movie business, which is really great.
I feel the fact that a lot of bigger companies have now been having people of color and women as bigger roles definitely will help younger kids, because they get to see somebody on the big screen who looks like them, and I feel it's a nice change of pace in a way, because even with, for example, Barbies and stuff, years ago you could only find those
white Barbies,
the white, the blonde, when the original Barbies, but now there's Barbies of every skin color, different races, even different body types, and I feel now every a lot of things are starting to get more including, inclusive to everybody instead of just one specific type of person.
Yeah.
Also a quote from Forbes that talks about disadvantages of not having representation in the media, saying popular media can have a negative impact on whites' perception of people of color. One study found that nonverbal racial biases in facial expressions and body languages as represented on popular television shows influence white viewers' racial biases. Furthermore, a lack of contact between racial groups can lead to greater reliance on media stereotypes when formulating ideas about people outside one's race. So is there anything that you think about that?
I think the first thing that I think about that when I like hear that quote is like, you think about before like Black Panther and the movies that we talked about, most of the like media representation of Black people were like in documentaries, like talking about like the civil rights movement and like slavery and before that, and like as much as those films are super important to have and like they share a great message, it's just like you don't like that's not the only message that should be portrayed. And like I don't know, I feel like when I think of movies before that, like Black Panther, like there weren't really any movie where like there was just like a Black person like just in like a like I don't know, I guess normal is like a bad word, but like just casted in a role,
like a Black person that is like a superhero that Black kids can look up to.
Yeah,
because I feel like a lot of like superheroes before like a couple of years ago, they were like, you know, everybody could look up to them, but it was more centered for the like white kids, because then the people of like the kids of color don't see anybody who's a superhero that looks like them.
Yeah.
And I feel like being able to see somebody who is like looks similar to you in the media as like a role model means a lot.
Yeah. And just like if you're like surrounded by a bunch of people who like, if you want to be something and you don't see anyone around you like in that role, it's hard to imagine yourself in that role. So just like having more representation in media kind of like helps people say like, oh well, like they did that, so I could do that too, which also just brings more positive feelings, I guess.
Yeah. But I definitely do agree with a part of what that quote said, where it said that a lack of contact between racial groups can lead to greater reliance on media stereotypes when formulating ideas about people outside one's race. Because when you don't get to know a person and you just get to know like stereotypes about their race and like other people of their race, I feel like you start to make like assumptions and you start to think things that aren't necessarily true just because of what you hear.
Yeah.
And like everybody's different. You know, a race doesn't define your actions. So I feel like you can't like base your thoughts on a person because of their skin color.
Yeah. Definitely. And I feel like going back to like just like the reliance of like social media and forming perceptions of other people, like you talk about movies like we mentioned before, like Encanto and Turning Red, like the way they're presented also I feel like really like makes people like the backlash that these movies have received or just very different, and like the comments that people have made, because like Encanto, like they're both movies are loosely about the same thing when it comes down to it, which is like generational trauma and like dealing with like do you want to conform to your culture versus like breaking free, and just like, but it's like the way that they're like presented, like with Encanto being very like magical and detached from reality, like it's like a way of allowing the viewers to like understand the cultures and family expectations, but like they don't apply them to like actual people, because like all of these characters have like magical powers and all of this, so it's like harder. Whereas like Turning Red is set in a more realistic setting where like it's about a 13-year-old girl who lives in Toronto, Canada, and like the only like magical element is that like she turns into a red panda, and like but like other than that, like she's still going through puberty, she's still like dealing with boys and like family trouble and like between like friends and family and choosing all of that. And it's just because like I just feel like because it's set in a more realistic setting, like it's an actual place, and like it's like the backlash that I've heard from it is just more like, well, like I don't want my kid watching that because like they talk about like puberty and periods and like that's gross, like I don't want my kids like watching that, or like oh like this kid is being too like the main character is being too rebellious, like I don't want my kids watching that. But like you kind of see the same thing when it comes to like Encanto. It's just like the way the movies are presented, it's just so different that like you just like the reactions are just different when it comes to audience.
And I feel like those are two really good movies for younger kids to watch, because it's like when you're younger, especially before you go to like kindergarten or preschool, or if you're homeschooled, you're like seeing people of your own skin color, and you're not like seeing like other cultures, and so I feel like these type of movies are really good just to get like younger kids like to understand that there are other people and other cultures in the world, and to not like have any negative reactions when they see it like for themselves in person. Another really big part of representation today are your role models, and I feel like in the media a lot of times people of color are presented as like bad role models compared to like white people, and it goes for more than just like famous people or actresses or whatever. It goes for just like people in general, I feel like.
Yeah. And like also going back to like Hollywood and stuff, like among white, black, and Middle Eastern or Northern African actors, women are like significantly underrepresented in the top films of 2020 compared to men of those groups. So it's like adding on to like the issue of like there's very low diversity. There's also just like low amounts of women in these films too, which is like something you need to improve because women exist in this country.
And I feel like a lot of the times the women that are put in films that like do very well are often sexualized.
Yeah.
Like for example, in Euphoria, I feel like people may notice that one of the characters, Cassie, is often like sexualized almost in every episode, even when it's not needed. And I feel like that makes it really hard to be able to like look up to certain people as a role model when they have like they're incredibly talented, but they're also like very like yeah.
Also like another example is in like the character of Black Widow. Throughout like the Marvel movies when she was like first introduced, like she wore a lot of like low cut tops, and like it was just over sexualizing her body, and like the suit that she had was like super tight. And then like throughout like the Marvel like universe and throughout the years, like it's gotten a lot less, and like because like the actress has like stood up for herself and was like, I don't want this anymore. Like we need to like stop sexualizing like superheroes that are women, because like men aren't really getting sexualized like when it comes to this, and like it's just like so different. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you come back next week for our next one.
And if you have any questions or you want to continue the conversation or just speak your mind, please feel free to say anything you want to into the comments. And the links for all of the websites that we got our facts from are in the bio. And make sure to follow our Instagram.
Bye!
Thank you.